I was so excited to be in my brother's wedding, then I found out everyone knew but me. When I confronted him, his husband mocked me. I walked away, but that's when the calls started pouring in. My brother, 31M, and I, 30F, have always been incredibly close, almost like twins. Our bond is a core part of our family, one of the few constants in our lives. When we argue, which is rare and usually minor, it unsettles everyone, and they try to fix it because it feels unnatural. He was the one who walked me down the aisle at my wedding. I named one of my children after him, and we even have matching tattoos. We talk on the phone nearly every day. When he started planning his wedding, he asked me to be a groomsman while making his friend, around 35F, his best man. This surprised everyone, considering his role at my wedding and the fact that no one in our family really knows this friend. I admitted that it hurt my feelings, but he responded with, "My wedding isn't about you." Fair enough, I respected his decision and agreed to do what he asked. Throughout the planning, he called me daily. We exchanged ideas, and I helped with various tasks. I chose to focus on making his day as special as possible rather than worrying about titles. He assigned me the role of flower fairy since it was a child-free, LGBTQ+ wedding, and I happily agreed. However, when it came to dress and shoe choices, both he and his best man dismissed all of my suggestions. She kept suggesting plain heels priced around $100, which was way beyond my $45 budget, especially for simple gold heels. The wedding party had a clear mean girl energy from the start. I felt like an outsider, which I initially attributed to the fact that they all lived in another state. But things escalated when they called my preferred shoes too slutty just because they had wraparound straps. Feeling alienated, I asked if I could simply attend as a guest so I could wear what I wanted and avoid the group's exclusionary behavior. My brother refused, saying he couldn't get married without me by his side. However, when I arrived in town for the wedding, I found out they had held the bachelor party the night before I got there. Everyone from the wedding party was invited except me. I brushed it off and focused on my role. I put on my fairy wings, danced down the aisle, and gave my first ever fairy wedding speech. Everything seemed to go well, until the drag show. During the performance, one of the drag queens got on stage and announced that this wedding was just for show, because my brother and his partner had actually gotten married a year earlier. Stunned, I turned to the wedding party and asked if they knew. They did. They had all attended the real wedding. Everyone except me. As I sat there trying to process everything, my mom, who had given them $3,000 to help with the wedding costs, stormed up to ask if I had known about their prior marriage. When I told her I had no idea, she immediately shifted to supporting me, realizing how unfair the situation was. It wasn't about the fact that they had already been married. They were free to do what they wanted. What hurt was that I had spent over $4,000 on this wedding. Since I was coming from out of state, I paid for a plane ticket and a week-long Airbnb. At one point, most of the wedding party stayed in my rental because they had nowhere else to go, without even offering to contribute. I also paid for my dress, handmade fairy wings, and various other expenses. I had invested so much time, money, and effort into this wedding. Then, it hit me, the lies. My brother got married, and just 3 days later, he was at my house while I was giving birth to my last child. He held my newborn, knowing he had just gotten married, and said nothing. For a year, he gaslit me, making me feel like I was crazy for feeling left out. He told me he couldn't get married without me there, all while lying to my face every single day. After realizing all of this, I tried to leave quietly without making a scene. His husband mockingly asked if I was mad. I simply replied that we could talk another day and that they should enjoy their night. I managed to leave without drawing attention, but before I could go, the newlyweds pulled me into a room. My brother was crying, insisting that he never meant to hurt me. I kept my composure and told him to enjoy his night. We would talk later. His husband, however, snidely remarked, "Oh, so there is something to talk about then?" I just repeated that we could talk another day. They invited me to brunch, and I vaguely responded that I'd see if I was up for it. The next morning, I found out that not only were they going to brunch, but so was the entire wedding party and some guests. I chose not to go. I wasn't going to put myself in another situation where I felt ganged up on for simply having feelings. Instead, I left the wedding group chat on Snapchat, which they were notified of. Soon after, my brother's husband started blowing up my phone, as well as my friends. We ignored them and went about our day. Since then, I have barely spoken to my brother, only exchanging brief words when necessary before heading to the airport. Before I left, I asked them to crop me out of the wedding photos. I didn't want to be associated with a fake wedding or be reminded of how ridiculous and humiliated I felt. I told them I didn't want to speak to them again. My brother said nothing. His husband, however, responded with, "You're a narcissist, and I feel bad for the people who have to deal with you." If anything, narcissistic would be more fitting for someone who tricked 100 people into attending a wedding, some of whom even paid for parts of it, only to later reveal it was all a sham. I reacted to the wasted time, money, and energy I had spent on a fake wedding. But sure, I'm the narcissist. LOL. At this point, I don't know what to do. I have them both blocked. A clear divide has formed in our family, and my brother has made no effort to fix it. He had the chance to show me what I meant to him, and he did. Now, I have to accept that. A few clarifications. Is my brother in an abusive relationship? That's for each person to interpret. I'm not labeling it as abuse because I'm not in that relationship with them. The mention of the drag queens was simply part of the story. One of them made the announcement, it's just a fact. Some people are twisting this into something phobic, which is absurd. Our families have always been supportive and accepting. My mom doesn't hate my brother, but she's deeply disappointed by his actions. She's doing her best to support both of her hurt children. A gay wedding and a child-free wedding are two separate things. They didn't ban gay kids, lol. I mentioned both to explain why I was a flower fairy instead of a flower girl. The wedding had a gay/dragon theme. I wore my wings proudly and danced down the aisle. Again, nothing phobic there. Some of you are reaching. Also, misusing the term narcissistic to weaponize it against someone is just ridiculous. Update. I'll do my best to include as much information as possible, but since Reddit limits post length, I'll summarize where necessary and answer the common questions. Update. There is no update. Everything remains the same, they're still blocked. Someone suggested that I write my brother a letter, which I did the day after everything happened. I left it in his room, expressing all my feelings and explaining in detail how deeply hurt I was. We then had a 2-hour drive where he said absolutely nothing, even after reading my letter. When I landed, my husband told me that my brother had messaged him, dismissing my feelings as an overreaction. That's when I lost my composure and said things I'm not proud of. However, despite that, I stand by my truth and my perspective on what happened. Clarifications. This is not about any kind of phobia. Both families have been fully supportive, and my brother and his husband represent themselves, not an entire community. The mention of drag queens was only relevant because one of them announced that they had secretly married a year ago. If someone sees an issue with that, it's their problem. My brother's husband is not someone I would label as abusive. However, I do believe he is emotionally immature. I'm not someone who blindly agrees with everything, and I think he's always felt threatened by my ability to see through his nonsense. Weak men dislike strong women, that's a fact. That said, we had no conflict before or during the wedding. I even made it clear that if my brother loved him and wanted to marry him, I would support that. My mom is trying to support both of us. She could never hate my brother, but she absolutely hates what he did. How I feel now. I don't know who I am without my brother. He was just as important to me as my children and my husband, it was always us. To say that I'm mourning this loss is an understatement. This situation has forced me to question a 30-year relationship. The fact that he was capable of living a double life that excluded me has completely shattered my world and my sense of reality. I'm not okay. For the next year, I plan to go no contact. I'll be focusing on therapy, taking care of my mind and body, and putting good karma into the world. Maybe after that, I'll be in a place where I can decide whether to close this door permanently or try to rebuild something new. Common questions. Was my baby's birth overshadowed? No. This was my 5th child, and the date they secretly married had nothing to do with my pregnancy, it was their dating anniversary. Am I upset they had a small wedding first and a big ceremony later? No. That's fine. It's not what they did, it's how they did it. Am I a Russian bot pushing propaganda? No, but those comments did make me laugh. Why would they do this to me? I have no idea. If I had done something horrible to deserve this, at least I'd have an explanation, but I don't. At the end of the day, I don't know if there's anything my brother could do to fix this. I'll always wonder if he's telling me the truth or what else he might be hiding. After the way his husband spoke to me, and the fact that my brother allowed it, I am disgusted with both of them. I deleted my original post because I didn't want them to be attacked. Sadly, I still have this instinct to protect my brother, even though I don't know him anymore. Brother-in-law's response in the original post. Hey, this is the brother-in-law. First off, the idea of having a big wedding ceremony a year after getting married wasn't mine. However, once we decided to go through with it, we had multiple discussions about whether we should inform people beforehand, precisely to avoid situations like this. I've never had a great relationship with OP, but I tried to make things work for the sake of my husband, her brother, because I knew how close they were. Despite our past interactions, I never wanted to come between them or damage their bond. OP refused to discuss the situation at all. We attempted to apologize and explain that there was never any intent to humiliate or offend her, but she wouldn't engage, especially on the night of the wedding. The following day at the Airbnb, I attempted to have a conversation with her about how she was feeling, but she responded with sarcasm and dismissed the idea that there was anything to discuss. That's when I made the comment, "So there is something to talk about." Eventually, I let it go and left the room. From what she did say, it seemed like she was viewing the situation entirely through her own lens, believing this was some intentional effort to embarrass her, when it absolutely wasn't. That being said, after reading her perspective here, I can understand why she might feel that way, and for that, I am genuinely sorry. I'm not sure of the best way to respond in this space, but if anyone has questions, I'm open to answering them. OP's first response, you/exact_butterscotch40. At this point, it doesn't matter. You're married now, and you both made your choice. You decided together that this was a good idea, and now you have to accept the consequences. I want nothing to do with either of you ever again. There's no reason to keep discussing this because it's done. The fact that you started your post by admitting you've never liked me just confirms everything I already knew. I truly wish you and my brother happiness, but as far as I'm concerned, this conversation is over. I've listened to your explanation, and it still doesn't justify what you both did. I'm choosing to walk away. OP's second response, you/exact_butterscotch40. He admitted it himself, they knew what they were doing. He literally said they didn't want to tell people because those people were happy. That's manipulation. Lying to people to get what you want is manipulation. Withholding information so that others can't make an informed choice? Also manipulation. They knew exactly what they were doing. Someone in the comments said, her brother doesn't value her the same way she values him. That's it. That's the whole issue. They showed me exactly what I meant to them. The reasoning behind it doesn't even matter anymore. Maybe this was just an oversight, maybe it was a mistake, but the impact remains the same. And so does my decision. I don't want any part of their lives anymore. I truly wish them happiness, because I will always love my brother. If he's happy, then I'm happy for both of them. But our relationship was the price they chose to pay for this wedding, and I refuse to pretend otherwise. When I first shared my story, I was just trying to process my emotions. I never expected it to go viral. For that, I am sorry. I did try to take down the post, but it was too late. I realize now that my brother-in-law never liked me, and that's fine. But what I'm about to say won't matter to him. My heart is shattered. This feels like a death, because, in a way, it is. The bond my brother and I had died that night. He was always my person. Now, he isn't. And I have never felt more alone. I honestly don't know if I'll ever be okay. Their responses only confirm everything I already knew and felt. We each have our own perspective, but the truth is, everyone in the family is feeling the loss of what my brother and I had. This changes everything. Still, I'll continue to root for both of them, from afar. If either of them ever has an emergency, they can call me, and I'll be there. But outside of that, I'm done. He doesn't like me? Fine. I'm out of his life now. He doesn't get to push everything onto my brother and then step in when it suits him. My brother-in-law is not a safe space for me, and I'm sure he feels the same about me. So, he wins. I'm stepping away. I hope they have a happy life. Comment by 8 marshmallows to the BIL. I have a few questions. Why did OP's brother keep their marriage a secret for an entire year? I can understand wanting to surprise most of the guests, but his own sister and mother? That seems unnecessarily cruel. Also, why wasn't OP given the option to step down from the wedding party? And did you actually call her a narcissist? Response from you/objective_code_5948, BIL. In hindsight, keeping the marriage a secret was definitely a poor decision, and I fully admit that. As for the other concerns, it's complicated. While OP and I never had a great relationship, I didn't want to make things worse, so I always left it up to her brother to handle any communication with her. Reading all of this now, I realize this is the first time I'm even hearing that she wanted to step down from the wedding party. I genuinely had no idea. To be honest, I have ADHD, so I'm not great at planning, and between the two of us, OP's brother is the organized one. I wasn't heavily involved in the wedding planning details. As for the comment, I regret how I worded it, but yes, I did say that after she refused to talk to anyone for 2 days. Then, as soon as her brother dropped her off at the airport, she added both of us to a group chat and went off, making it clear she was going to say her piece but wasn't willing to hear anyone else's perspective. I know my comment was harsh, and at the time, I meant it that way, but I wish I had handled it differently. Unfortunately, I can't take it back now. Regarding the secrecy, I now see how it was a mistake. At the time, we were worried about upsetting people, and it became one of those situations where the longer you wait, the harder it is to say something. By the time the wedding was close, we did consider telling OP and a few key family members, but we ultimately thought it would be better to avoid a huge conflict right before the wedding. We figured everyone was happy in the moment, so we decided to just go through with it. Clearly, that was a mistake, and I regret it. That comment I made was the only harsh thing I said to OP the entire week, and it came after multiple attempts to smooth things over with her and her brother, only to be met with coldness and accusations. I understand she's angry, and that's fine, but her brother doesn't deserve the level of hate she's directing at him. At the time, I only had limited insight into OP's perspective, and it was hard to filter through all the anger. But reading everything now, I do have more empathy. I still don't agree with everything, but I understand her feelings better, and for that, I am truly sorry. I wish things had played out differently. Also, sorry for the run-on sentences. Response from d_bitterbull. So now you're putting most of the blame on your husband, OP's brother? That's not exactly being a supportive partner. Also, saying I have ADHD doesn't excuse your behavior. You're still responsible for your actions. The only truly honest thing I see in your response is that you didn't like OP because of past interactions. Final response from you/objective_code_5948, BIL. I'm not blaming anyone, I'm just explaining what happened. My ADHD doesn't excuse anything, and that wasn't my intention. I fully accept my part in this. But I also wasn't some mastermind plotting against OP, as people seem to think. We made a bad choice that hurt her, and I genuinely regret that. That being said, I'm not going to sit here and let thousands of strangers assume the worst about me without at least clarifying my perspective. There's a long history between OP and me that she left out of her posts, and she knows it. Anyway, I've said my piece. I've apologized and tried to smooth things over as best as I can. I don't hold any ill will toward OP or anyone else. None of this was meant to hurt anyone, but it did, and that's unfortunate. I didn't orchestrate any of it, and in the end, I said one mean thing after getting attacked in texts. Nobody's perfect. People here have already made up their minds about me based on a one-sided story, and that's fine. This is Reddit, after all. But at the end of the day, most of the commenters weren't there and don't actually know any of the people involved. I truly do wish you all the best. That's all I have to say. Another wedding guest's perspective. A Reddit user, u/slaphappypap, who attended the wedding, but wasn't part of the wedding party, shared their thoughts. They agreed that what happened to OP was unfair but questioned some of the details presented. According to them, OP's brother's husband is one of the most upstanding people they know. They've worked with him for over a year and seen him go out of his way to help even those he doesn't particularly like. They find it hard to believe he would intentionally hurt OP unless there were missing details about what was said before the fallout. They also disputed OP's claim that the entire wedding party attended a post-wedding lunch without her. They were there and noted that only 2 out of 6 wedding party members attended. The grooms themselves didn't go because they wanted to talk to OP. They suggested OP may have made assumptions about certain events, such as the lunch and her brother's husband's role in the secrecy. They insisted that the decision to keep the marriage secret was entirely OP's brother's idea. Another commenter, the Juicy Juice, acknowledged that there are always multiple sides to a story but focused on the key issues. They pointed out that OP put a lot of time, effort, and money into the wedding under the impression that she was an important part of it, only to be blindsided by the truth in a humiliating way. They empathized with OP, saying they'd also feel embarrassed and hurt in her position. u/slaphappypap agreed with this but reiterated that OP made incorrect assumptions about at least some details. They suggested that if OP and her brother had an open conversation, it might clear up some misunderstandings, though it wouldn't erase the hurt. They also found it unfortunate that OP's brother didn't speak with her during the car ride. Ultimately, u/slaphappypap concluded by saying they don't personally know OP but are close to her brother and his husband. They wished everyone well but decided to step away from the ongoing discussion, calling it a shit show. Update. Moving forward. If you're reading this, it means you're really invested in my family drama, lol. But honestly, I'm okay. I'll either be okay or I won't, but either way, I'm going to keep moving forward. If you want to follow along, you can find me on TikTok, @car29. I'm not trying to be an influencer, I just plan to use it as a personal diary, a coping mechanism, and a safe space. Note. Reddit user u/exact_butterscotch40 has shared TikTok videos of herself in the dress she wore to the wedding. She has also spoken about what happened after the announcement, including how the wedding party seemed to expect her to make a scene, something she chose not to do. u/mamapilondon, transcribed OOP's TikTok here. Boop. This will probably be my last post about this, hopefully. But after I got home, something really hit me. I just want to ask, if you were S8 as a child, under the age of 10, what would it take for you to willingly be in the same room as the person who did that to you? Would you do it for your brother's wedding? Because I did. His biological dad, my mom had me while they were separated, then they got back together, was the one who hurt me as a child. And I still showed up for my brother. The worst part? It felt like he knew that I was sacrificing my dignity just to be there. I don't understand it. But honestly, that wasn't even on my mind when everything first happened. It took me a few days to process the extent of what I had done, how much I had given up for this wedding. I feel like I sacrificed my integrity and morals just to be around this man. If the wedding hadn't been child-free, I would have never let my kids be there, knowing he was attending. I refused to sit near him. I didn't want him thinking he could come up and talk to me, though thankfully, he didn't. I promised myself from a young age that I would never be around him again. That he would never be part of my life, my children's lives, anything. Because he's absolutely disgusting. And honestly, that might be the most sickening part of this whole situation. On top of everything else, it just adds another layer of absolute disgust. Update. I wish I could say my brother had begged for my forgiveness, that somehow things had gone back to the way they were. But they haven't. Nothing has changed, except for my perception of someone I once thought I knew. I know some people might not understand because they aren't close to their siblings, but for me, this feels like a true loss. A death, even. And sometimes, the grief is so overwhelming that I don't know what to do with it. He hasn't reached out. He hasn't explained. He hasn't even cared, if I'm being completely honest. And that realization has been a total mindfuck. To go from someone being as important to you as your own husband and children, to then watch them repeatedly show you how little you actually meant to them, it's devastating. He has doubled down on the idea that he did nothing wrong, insisting that I'm overreacting. And honestly, that's the biggest slap in the face. If someone can't acknowledge their wrongdoing, they will never be truly sorry. And if they aren't sorry, then there's nothing stopping them from doing it again. Many of you pointed out that maybe our relationship only ever meant this much to me, and I think you were right. For a long time, I cried every single day. I cried during the times we used to talk on the phone. I cried when a song reminded me of him. And sometimes, I cried for no reason at all, just from the sheer emptiness of it all. But now, I find myself crying less. Sometimes, when I think of him, my next thought is, wow, it's been days since he even crossed my mind. I guess that's progress, right? I don't cry every day anymore. But I'd be lying if I said the tears had stopped completely. They still come, tears he doesn't deserve, but that's the thing about unconditional love. It doesn't just disappear, even when the person you love breaks your heart. It lingers. It stays. But at some point, you have to decide that while the love might still exist, the person who hurt you no longer has access to it. We have spoken. Briefly. Over the phone during the holidays to deal with a family emergency involving another family member. It was pretty much all business. Everyone around us kept saying, "I'm so glad you guys are talking again," but we weren't talking again. We were just dealing with business. And I guess that's all the talking we will ever do again. At one point my husband chimed into our phone conversation and told him how much he misses him too, and he cried. I guess I forgot I wasn't the only one losing someone, but either way that doesn't change anything. My kids haven't even noticed his absence. He did try to send them Christmas gifts through my mom, but only after I pointed out that he didn't even acknowledge my son's birthday. So is that all he'll ever be? Just an impersonal, once-a-year gift uncle? I told my mom to send the gifts back. My kids don't need that, especially when they already have enough gift uncles on my husband's side. That moment made me realize something important. If you don't have a good, respectful relationship with me, you don't get access to my children. Period. To be honest, he was never that involved with them anyway. I know he loves and cares about them in a general sense, but he never made the effort to really get to know them. Any connection he had with them came through me, through the stories I shared, not through his own initiative. There was never a deep, pre-established bond between him and my kids. And now that things between us are broken, I see no reason to let him have a relationship with them. I'd feel the same way about anyone who treated me this way. If someone repeatedly shows that they don't love and respect you, why would you allow them access to your children? Especially when their only contribution is a wrapped box once a year. I'm not fully healed yet. But I'm getting there. It's not better, but it's getting better. I still feel like I'm suffering the consequences of someone else's actions, and for a while, I was spiraling. But now, I'm finding my new normal. I'll update again at the 1-year mark.